welcome to the JTM Community Podcast, where we are building a community you can bank on. If you are watching this, you already know who today's guest is. You have seen her multiple times before. If you are listening, however, you don't quite know, so we'll get into that in just a few moments. Of course, if you want to touch base with me, you can do so at j-tm.community/podcast. If you want to chat or talk about advancement advising, you can also on the top right find all of the links to our various medias, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, TikTok. Facebook is the easiest place to engage with the community, share your stories, have a chat, as well as one-click polls. So you can vote through a single click on Facebook. Again, it's the easiest. You can also vote on the main site. If you are looking for some additional resources, whether that would be counseling in the Mount Pleasant, Michigan area, or entertainment for Twitch streamers, or national resources for crisis and other things, you can also find that under the community partners on the website as well. Without further ado, we are going to jump into your voted topic, which is the idea simple but not easy, with our friend who is also I don't know if he's the husband of you or you the wife of him. So
he's the husband of me.
He's the husband of you. So we are with Meshayla, who, just for anyone who might be watching this for the first time and don't know any of her background, Meshayla has a couple of jobs, which we highlighted the last time you were in, largely involved in the healthcare realm of things. So you can only imagine some of her experiences through the pandemic and whatnot. She is also a pseudo counselor, aka bartender, as well, which definitely holds value as we had chatted. Am I missing anything that would be helpful for listeners or viewers to know about you, Shay?
No.
All right. So with that idea of simple but not easy, what does that mean to you?
So simple, when I think of simple, I think of like a simple set of directions.
Okay.
And then, but not easy, it doesn't mean that they are easy to follow.
Sure. Yeah.
It's kind of the basic understanding of it.
Mine as well. So simple simply means not complex, but it doesn't mean easy, right? Things can be simple and easy, or simple and difficult, or anywhere in between. So can you think of, I'll share a little bit. So I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions that we have, or that we're told, or that we tell ourselves, is that it's not that simple, or, oh, that's complicated, right? A lot of things in life aren't complicated. I mean, I'm not saying that nothing is, because there are definitely things that can be. From my experience, both personally and professionally, when people say that, what they're saying is, I don't have the discipline, or I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to do that thing or engage in that kind of conversation. So we tell ourselves, well, it's not that simple, or it's complicated. Hell, isn't there a Facebook relationship status that says complicated?
It's complicated, yeah.
Right, but the reality is it's not. So you're with that person or you're not, right? And you might be like tentatively with them. That's not complicated. We're like just starting to date. We're not ready to say we're dating. Not complicated, right? I don't feel like that's even close to complicated.
But it adds an air of mystery when you say it is complicated.
For what purpose? Why the air of mystery?
So then I think that one's just used as like a way to be like, I'm still kind of available as like a, like that's still putting the vibe out.
What it should really say is not fully committed, is what it should.
Exactly, yeah. Like sometimes still change my mind.
I like that. When it comes to your life experience, whether personally or professionally, can you think of moments where maybe initially you felt like things were more complicated than when you just broke it down and was like, okay, this is difficult, but it's a simple thing?
Every day. every
What'd you
day.
say?
Let's I think almost everything I do, I kind of make more difficult in the beginning, especially when it's something new, because it's the anxiety kind of takes over. And whether it's like one thing of trying to think, like when I started bartending, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a learning curve. Like, I'm going to have to relearn how to do craft cocktails. I'm going to relearn how to like customer service again. Because like the service industry customer service is different than the hospital customer service. Because
I would think at least a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not trying to work for tips when I'm in the hospital. So I can still be real with patients. I can still be sweet and friendly, but so I kind of like made it more difficult in my brain by thinking of like all the things I would have to do and like going through all the what ifs. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, no, this isn't as hard as it is. It's like riding a bike, and being able to time manage and everything was very simple once I was there, but it was the lead up that was becoming more difficult.
Kind of all the things that your brain told you it would be or that it would require, but as you got into it, it's like that's is relatively simple.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say it was simple or easy or both?
Both. Once it was there, it was going through the motions. It was easy, but yeah, before then I was thinking of every little thing, and it was like, oh, not as hard.
Like, I got this. The most common thing I feel that I see are tasks or connections. So families and couples counseling, right? There's this predisposition of it's being difficult. And I'm trying to think of, I know there has to be exceptions. I'm trying to anecdotally think of them as I'm talking of times where things actually were more complicated and I'm failing. So I'm not saying they haven't happened, but it's not very common for it to have. Again, whether couples, families, whatever the dynamic, sometimes parents to children, partners, is that they begin with this level of complexity, right? Like they're talking that way. And as they begin to break it down, it was just willingness to trust or divulge certain info about themselves. So recently having a conversation, and what was being expressed was frustration, right? But as that individual continued to talk, concluded very, very quickly that they were never frustrated. They were overwhelmed, but didn't want to acknowledge that they were overwhelmed. So what they acted on was a sense of frustration, which created an argument, right? But at the end of it all, it was like, no, I had all these things going on. I was overwhelmed and I couldn't address the thing that they wanted me to address right then. So I snapped at them, and this is what it looked like, versus saying, hey, like there's a lot coming at me right now. Give me 2 minutes. I'll be right with you. Right. So again, it was created as this complex scenario, but when it broke down, it was down to one word: overwhelmed. Have you ever had experiences, whether personally, again, or professionally, whether it's you directly or others, that kind of resonated with you?
Thinking things were more simple, but they were actually complex.
Or vice versa, yeah.
Vice versa. Trying to think. Usually, like any DIY project that I think can happen, I'm like, oh, that's going to be like 2 steps and done. And then Branson's like, no, I have to go get this tool, this tool, this tool. I have to get this. We have to do this. And I'm like, oh, that's usually where like I try to simplify things.
Sure, I do the same.
And it gets me in a pickle because I'm like, even painting our wall that I painted down here in the basement, I was like, it's cool. I just need to go pick up some paint. He's like, No, we need tape so that you don't paint on the other walls. We need stuff for the floor. We need paint rollers. You're not tall enough to reach the top. Like,
we just ran into that a couple of weeks ago. We had to pull some new cord into the house, right? And like we thought through it. This is what we need. Went to the store and got the stuff. So I mean, it wasn't just like happenstance. Like we're just like, oh, let's do this thing and then do it. So we kind of planned and prepared, and then it was like this should be like a 10-minute job or like totally simple. And then we got into it, and nothing went according to plan. It was a shit show, and it took about a day and a half to do it. So no, I think I wonder why that is. When we watch something, right? So you were like, hey, this is a Pinterest thing. Like everybody's doing it. It's pretty easy. Or you watch a video and be like, oh yeah, let's do that. Why do you think things can appear simple and be more complicated?
okay, so that's based on skill level and prior knowledge.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
somebody who's been baking for 10 years can make a cake look like Ariel from The Little Mermaid. And then when I try to do it, because I just bake when I have time and I'm not a creative person, it just looks like a pile of poop on a cake with some red hair. Like, and that's due to skill level. And then that's the same thing like at work. Sometimes I'm paired with a nurse who has been a nurse for 15 years, and they know their floor, and they know how, they've seen patients decline like that. They've been able to see normal versus abnormal. And coming in as a nursing student, where I do have experience in seeing some things, but my job up until now has always just been like, oh, they look a little off. Let me tell the nurse, and the nurse is going to investigate and then tell me what to do. So it's kind of like where the nurse was like, oh, I saw that simple neuro change. Like, did you not see that? And I'm like, they just stared off into space for like 5 seconds. That's it. Like that. So skill level really changes the simplicity from person to person. And things I find simple in my daily life that I've been doing over and over is not the same as what Branson's going to find simple.
Oh, sure. Very different life experiences.
Yeah.
So can you think, and I agree with that 100%, is both familiarity, life experience, and expertise, as you said, skill level is really what determines whether something is simple or not. I mean, rocket science to you and I would be very complicated. Rocket science to a rocket scientist, not so much.
Yeah, Branson holding a drill and putting a screw into the wall takes 2 seconds. It takes me 5 minutes. So I'm sitting there going around with the screw and can't, that.
Yeah. Yep. And if he had to care for someone in the hospital, he would similarly struggle. Absolutely.
Oh, wiping somebody's butt. Wiping poop off of somebody. Simple. Don't even think about it. Branson would be gagging and like
and
running
that's
away.
Something that even he does, right? For himself. Or I assume.
I would hope so.
Maybe that's where your skill level comes in, right?
True. Yeah. No.
So we're just picking on Branson. He is more than capable of managing.
He is.
What is something that, and we're going to go both ways. What is something that you feel is relatively simple, meaningful, that other people struggle with? And what do you feel is something that other people may feel is valuable, simple, that you struggle with?
Okay. One major thing I hear all the time is like, I'm a busy person with working a couple of jobs and having school and everything, and I have basically one day off a week. That's like simple for me. I'm able to get all my stuff done in one day. I can really use every hour of my day to like schedule it, where a lot of people look at me and they get almost overwhelmed just like hearing about my schedule and what I have to do in a day, because they're used to, well, I've got work that day. I can't do anything else after work. I need to go home and like unwind and just recover.
Sure.
And let's see, another way around. There's a lot that would be more challenging. Think of one right away.
Saying no?
Wow. That's yeah, saying no. Some people, my husband can tell people no. He doesn't want to hang out with them or he doesn't want to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Me, it's the amount of guilt that will come up from saying no, even if it's just to something little,
Mm-hmm.
is so overwhelming that like it's almost easier just for me to say yes and do it, even if it fucks up the rest of my day or the rest of my week by doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
it's often easier to deal with that aftermath than it would be to deal with the guilt of saying no.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Because I mean, that's something that is very common for folks, especially those with like the heart of a caregiver, if you will, right? Is the discomfort that goes in telling somebody you're not going to like help them with this thing can be very overwhelming.
It's the natural, like, you always want to help somebody. And when you kind of become that person that can make a difference and you can see how you saying yes changes the outcome for so many people, then you get kind of used to that and you like that gratification.
So you get more skilled in saying yes, really.
Yeah, you do. And a lot of times I'll say yes before I actually think through like what that's going to mean for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I talked about in my session on Tuesday,
Yeah.
saying no and that guilt is really like just rooted in the fact that like I put so much worth in what people see from me and tasks and what I can do for them. That's where I put my self-worth, is what I can do for others. And also just the like fear of losing somebody just from saying no.
Like losing them, like they need help, or it's life and death. And if you don't,
no, losing them as like they won't love me anymore.
Oh, okay.
Or they won't want to be in my life anymore, kind of thing.
So I'm not looking for specifics as much as additional clarity.
Okay.
Not looking for names, not even relationships to you.
Yeah.
So if you think of a situation or a person where that has been a fear, and you reflect on the idea that if I refuse this help, that they're no longer they will no longer be a part of my life. I'm questioning that person's value of you. Does that make sense? I know I worded that strangely.
A little bit. Like, you're questioning.
How much does that person value you? If you telling them no is the deal breaker of that relationship?
They would value me very little. And that's like, I'm on a need basis only.
Yep. They want what you provide, not you as Meshayla.
Yeah.
It's whatever service you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, right, and that being your answer, not mine, how do you remember that in the moments where that guilt is creeping up, when you know you probably should say no? Your week is overwhelmed, you have all of these other things, and you said, I'll say yeah, even if it fucks up the rest of the week, just because navigating the aftermath of the messed up week is easier at times than saying no. So in those moments where you know you should say no, how do you remind yourself that this is not a deal breaker, and if it is, that person doesn't really have value for me anyway.
I'm still working on that, but I'm also trying to remember that if the person I'm saying no to is somebody that I have like a deeper relationship with, I have to then trust that they will understand why I'm saying no and still have, the value in me besides what I can do for them. And I struggle that a lot. Like the main struggle recently has just been like all of my close friends and helping with their kiddos when I can. And it's like, I mean, I love those kids, but scheduling some babysitting in it's a lot.
Oh, sure.
Especially. But it's just having the trust in them that they value me for more than, being a babysitter. And also trust in myself and knowing that or what I have been practicing is my time is important and I don't have to validate the reason why I'm saying no to everybody and listing out I can't do this because I've got, this, and this. It's just basically no, I can't do that. And just saying those simple words is hard.
Versus feeling like you have to almost rationalize to diminish the guilt that you feel for saying no.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? To help that person understand that you truly cannot do it because there's not enough time or.
Yeah. That's all on my end too, most of it. Especially in my older years. I mean, before when I was younger, the friendships I thought I had, my early 20s, no, that was very much what I can do for them kind of friendship. But now that I've kind of figured out not only myself and what I need and just growing up in general, then it's okay, no, those friends aren't here just for what I can do. But it takes a lot of understanding yourself and what you need to be able to see that in your relationships.
Absolutely. And I feel like what you're talking about there is what we started with is the skill set, right? Is that the more you do that, so, which is, again, I'm hoping is one of the benefits of therapy, right? Is as you get more accustomed to it and experienced with that reflection and understanding yourself better and engaging in those dynamics, that putting those into exercise in the future become easier. I mean, what you've described is it's relatively simple, but you haven't had the experience and expertise in saying no, right?
Yeah.
So it's simple, but it's very, very difficult. Versus the whole goal is that it becomes easier as well.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Hopefully that's part of the goal, right? Well, in a healthy way, because doing unhealthy things can also become very, very easy, right? I mean, think of and not trying to shit on anyone. I don't have anyone in mind as I say this, but somebody who struggles with alcoholism, drinking is very easy for them, right? And to a degree, based on physical dependence, is almost necessary. They'll become sick if they don't. So drinking actually becomes easier than not drinking. Can you think of, aside from our conversation about saying no, can you think of a time in your life, and again, that doesn't have to be you personally, just an experience that doing something that wasn't conducive to a situation being better was simple and easy?
I mean, now I'm stuck on the alcohol train of thought, and just now I'm blanking. well, growing up, my parents always just found like drinking and not talking was easier than communicating with each other. But then it would always end up in then whatever they were feeling that day after like 3 or 4 drinks each, then it would turn into like this blowout type of fight. And so then
yeah, unhealthy, but happened easily. They were very skilled in that situation.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel that that was something that you've had to kind of unlearn or untrain as you entered into your own relationships, friendships, marriage?
I definitely had to, and I'm still untraining, especially I think I've made the most progress just in the last few months with, getting into the podcast and going to counseling and actually talking about stuff.
Investing in yourself, not just in other people.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Airline had it right this whole time.
And a lot of times I have to unlearn. I think I use busyness as my alcohol, I would say, as a way to avoid any hard conversations that I don't want to have. Like, oh, we can't talk about that. My brain is focused on this. But it's like, I'm not going to get any quality studying because I'm really sitting there just festering about what's pissing me off. And I'm not saying it until it's too much and I just break down and have like, come home and like sob in the shower just to get over it.
So you are a very insightful person. I imagine for a long time you've had that awareness, and like the idea of it is relatively simplistic, right? Of taking care of yourself, right? And no one knows how to do that better than we do, right? Barring like medical stuff, obviously we're not doctors, but if I'm sick, I'm hopefully the first one to know that I'm sick, or if I'm injured or hurt or, in a bad mood, whatever that would be. So what motivated you to acknowledge something you already knew, right? Rather simplistic, but to have the motivation, the discipline, the courage, the whatever you want to put in there to actually begin to do that work?
I realized that the pattern wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for me to stay in my career because shit's only going to get harder from here. I'm only going to have worse days at work. I'm going to have great days, yes. I'll celebrate those triumphs, but the difficulty in what I'm going to experience is only going to get worse. And if I let that, then bleed over into one little thing that Branson said or Branson did or somebody else said or did, then I, sit on that and harbor that and then mix it in with like all of the other emotions that I may experience from work. It's just that snowballs. And I haven't had the greatest like blueprint for relationships.
Fair, yeah.
I just know what I don't want to happen. And I kind of saw if I kept on the same pattern, it would kind of deviate into that where there might be resentment here at home, just because, it was getting to the point when I was working in dialysis that like Branson really had to like tiptoe around my feelings to see how I was feeling. And once he kind of made that clear to me, I was like, holy shit, that's like everything I didn't want to do was have to have somebody tiptoe around me or worry if my mood is going to ruin the rest of their day. kind of thing. And so I think just seeing that pattern keep going, and it has been, it did definitely crescendo over the last year or so, especially with just how the hospital's been going with COVID and everything. I didn't want it to continue, and that's really what spurred me to change and to look at myself. At first, I thought it was like, okay, I need to fix these little things in between our relationship so that we can still continue and be happily married for another like 40 years. But then it turned into like, oh shit, this relationship is only going to be that good if I figure out how to be nicer to myself and prioritize myself.
Kind of that idea of you're going to get out of this whatever you put into it. It's going to take some intentional investment, not just within the relationship, but within yourself as well.
Yeah. And I think before that, like aha moment of like, shit's got to change, it seemed a lot harder to be able to take the steps to do so. And me thinking like, oh, it's going to be years and years before I like even start feeling remotely better. I mean, like I'm so damaged, thinking I'm so damaged from my childhood that like it can't be fixed, or I'm always going to harbor that anger.
Have you had that thought in the past and it prevent you from seeking help sooner?
Yeah, because I have thought, I did do some therapy when Branson and I first started dating, and
which, to put in context for folks, was it's a hot minute ago. The two of you have been together.
I was 19. Yeah. I was 19. Like I was a child, so everything was fresh. I mean, I had just been on my own for like maybe a year and a half, and so still struggling in like what I want to do, everything, but
you're just starting an adult life. And
my anxiety was really bad and uncontrolled, because my mom thought while I was a teenager that if I had to go on any sort of like anti-anxiety meds or anything, then she failed as a parent, and so she never wanted to seek that. It was
so you getting help was a poor reflection on her.
Yeah, it was. So it never.
That's sad,
yeah, and then of course I just didn't know where to go when I was old enough to do it. And then that type of therapy I did for like a year and a half, but it just felt like she was more so just validating my patterns and how I was feeling. She would just kind of listen to me. There wasn't any like, what can I do to do this? It was more so just let's just talk about it. And I think talking about it almost just festered it more, and like just
like you marinated
it made me almost. It made me think like, okay, all this stuff I'm doing to cope every day and everything is fine because of how I grew up. I am allowed to act this way.
Almost from what you're saying, you felt like it almost made it permissive.
Exactly. Okay. Is what it
wasn't like change oriented. Hey, like this is hard and you've been through a lot of shit, but it can also be better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was more like it's hard. So you are resilient and what you're doing is great. So just keep on going. And I ran with that until I walked into this newer counselor, and she, I'm like, okay, I'll start from the beginning. Alcoholic stepdad, everything. And she's like, well, no, that's not really where I want to start. She's like, let's just, if we start talking and something, if I'll stop you and we'll work through it. And so like our sessions are they move pretty slow, like in session, it feels like, but then she's giving me so many tools to apply outside of our sessions that I've actually like made leaps and bounds.
where you're actually trying to implement change and a greater understanding and apply that to your life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. What do you feel, and I'm not trying to get you to like pinpoint a thing or a thought or an action,
Yeah.
is what do you feel was the thing that made like the difference for you? Was it just having a different experience with a counselor? I know you mentioned your relationship with Branson, kind of in the sense of the value you have for him and your relationship is much greater than the impact you saw work having. So you're like, hey, no, I need to make some changes. If work keeps going in this direction and we don't, it's going to cause us harm. What do you feel was kind of the accumulation of things that were like, hey, nope, like I understand this better, I understand me better, I need to take these actions? Because you could have just as easily not sought counseling. You could have just as easily not engaged in difficult conversations, right? When you can feel that there's a level of tension between you and a partner, like that doesn't feel good. And from what you said, you have experience not rocking the boat, right? Of just trying to peacekeep. But to have the conversation that you mentioned a few minutes ago, that was risky. It was risky for both of you to say, hey, like, what's going on? This isn't okay, and this is the harm it's causing our marriage.
I don't know if it was any one thing that really like flipped the switch. I think it was I have a better support system now. Like the friends I've made in nursing school where I'm, talking about what's going on and how stressed I am and da da da. I'm not hearing like well, you can do it. It's more of a like, that sounds awful. Why are you doing that kind of thing? Where, so instead of affirming like, or getting like a congratulatory, like, you're doing great, like, just keep going. It was more of just like why are you doing this to yourself kind of thing. So,
almost a questioning or critique that helps you kind of like process, like, why am I doing this? Is it worth it? Is there value? Am I trying to get to the next thing? Versus just being like buried by the premise of resilience that you're a bad bitch and you can deal with and take on the world and manage everything yourself and you don't need help. And
exactly.
That kind of survivor mentality. Sure.
Yeah.
And I wasn't calling you the B word. That was a complimentary.
Oh no, I know.
That is probably more for folks who may be listening. Like, what did he just say?
Oh, true.
So as you continue to move forward, and of course, as you said, it's a work in progress, as it is for all of us, right? What are things that you have learned, nuggets of wisdom based on your experience and gaining a greater skill set in doing this, that you feel like would be helpful for others to know? Kind of that idea of what do you wish you knew when this started? I couldn't tell if it's the animals or Branson.
No, it's the cat was trying to jump into the window and he failed and he just knocked a bunch of shit up.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, let's back up. What nugget of wisdom do I have?
So what would be the things that you've learned that you feel would be helpful for others? Kind of the things you wish you knew earlier that you know now.
What have I learned? So being uncomfortable is okay to an extent. And you can start with little steps of pushing out of your comfort zone. And also, let's see, taking it day by day has helped too. I get overwhelmed by like the bigger picture. So breaking it down and saying like, how am I handling today? How am I handling what's happened today? Okay, fairly good. There was a minor inconvenience that normally would have probably broke me down to tears. but I was able to kind of think through it and celebrated that little victory.
So kind of slowing down a little bit, being
Yeah.
able to take time to process, celebrate the victories, but take it slow, a day at a time. You don't have to, you went on your first date, you don't have to start planning the wedding, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
child's names, and you don't have to be the Ross of Ross and Rachel, right? Having to know all of the details when this is your very first date.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you do that? Again, with practice, absolutely. But how do you remind yourself of that? Of, hey, no, slow down, Shay.
By literally saying like stop. Like I don't know, I say stop in my brain when I'm starting to snowball. And I'm like, why am I wanting to snowball right now? Like, am I trying to move? And usually it comes down to like, well, I don't like how I'm feeling about this situation. So now I want to jump forward and through because this is uneasy. And this end goal would make me feel better. So I want to think about that. And so then I have to be like, let's stop. Let's remember where we're at and all of the stuff that doesn't make you feel uneasy.
And kind of acknowledging the very first thing you said is it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Right? If you're immediately trying to run from the discomfort, then, I mean, one, we're not dealing with the problem. And two, we might put ourselves in a worse problem. Right? No, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything else that you feel like, hey, for anyone that is struggling similar to you, this might be the make or break for you?
Listen to the feedback you're getting from everybody, all of it, whether it's the good feedback that makes you think what you're doing is okay, and the feedback where somebody's going, is that really what you want? Or is that really how that went? Listen to a lot of that, because that's usually where you'll find, wait a minute, this isn't normal. But I also don't like to be based off of a normal because everybody's different. But
yeah, sure.
I guess I should say this isn't healthy to me.
Okay.
Think about that.
Beautifully put.
And it's okay to celebrate yourself, even if it feels really hard and weird to do so.
Not only is it okay, but you absolutely fucking should do that.
Yes.
You absolutely should. When you have accomplished something and it makes you better, it's an achievement, it's growth, it's towards healthy, it is the betterment, you absolutely should celebrate that. Why do you think and I'm absolutely the same. Why do you think it tends to be so easy to celebrate others and their successes, achievements, or even the fact that they took a risk, even if they failed? It's much easier to celebrate that in someone else than to celebrate that for yourself.
Because it always comes down to being your own worst critic. You know, we've talked about it before. You know what you can do, and you know where your limits are, and you don't know that in another person. So your expectations are a lot lower for other people most of the time than they are for yourself.
As you say that, it makes me wonder, I guess is more rhetorical, is that because we don't have the additional context with others, if it makes our expectations of them more realistic, which makes our expectations of ourselves more unrealistic.
Yep.
That seems very simple, silly, but a pit that most of us at some point, and I would argue all of us at some point in our lives tend to fall into.
Yeah.
The moral of that story: watch your step. Thank you, Shay, so much for taking a moment this morning to have a chat. I know that it could have gone in any direction, so I appreciate your candor and your your willingness to engage in that conversation this morning. I apologize for mildly interrupting your breakfast this morning.
No, it was just ill-timed breakfast.
It made me hungry, so I'm excited to go eat after this. Of course, this is Meshayla. So for you who have watched or listened today, if this was your first experience with her, you can go check out, there's actually a few previous episodes, both with Shay individually, but also Shay and Branson, if you want to get to see their interaction and their story a little bit as well. If you want to touch base with me for advancement advising, you can do so through j-tm.community/podcast, which is also where you can vote. Top right side, you can get all of the links for YouTube, Facebook, Spotify. I'm missing something, TikTok. If you're looking for a little bit of human connection, inspiration, motivation, check out the TikTok videos, specifically the liked videos. You might have to go through 3 or 300 to find the thing that hits your heart for the day, but it's probably there because there's a whole ton of things. Again, thank you for tuning in. Shay, thank you for chatting with me this morning and for being part of a community where you belong.